on to another episode of the Old Timers Comic Book Show. This is a special edition, not our regular broadcast. However, can be the Old Timers without the Professor.
Hey, Johnny, how are you?
I'm very well. How are you?
I'm well.
Excellent. As you all know, we are normally three, so I would like to welcome our very special guest. No, not 13th Crusaders face for the first time ever in history. No, it is the fantastic Mr. Paul Kupperberg. Paul,
Hey.
how's it going?
Whoop, he's frozen.
Oh no, the time zones have done us in.
Well, that's Paul Kupperberg. That's his picture.
Yeah, there he is, right? Yeah.
Smiling as well.
Let me just make a note of when it is.
Hello.
Oh,
Hey, how's it going? Still frozen? There you
Well,
go.
yeah.
How's things there? Is there someone you playing with
Good,
your band with?
good.
Is
All
that
in-
right? All right.
Yeah, well, sometimes I have funky internet here, so hope for the best and expect the
All right. Nothing worse than funky internet. So, Paul, you're here to talk to us about your new book you've got coming out. It's called Direct Conversations. What was the impetus? Why did you
Yes.
decide to go with a book such as this?
Well, a couple of years ago, I did a book called Direct Currents, which was a bunch of interviews I had done in the around 1990 for DC Comics publications. I had only used bits and pieces of those interviews in articles for DC Comics Direct Currents, which was the monthly solicitation, comic shop giveaway that we were doing back in those days. And I had been writing that thing for years. I started writing it in the 70s in earlier, photo offset incarnations. Anyway, I found a bunch of the transcripts of these interviews, the raw transcripts. So I decided to, whip them into shape and annotate them heavily, and put them in the book.
Annotate them. Is that to hide the body? Is that what you're saying?
Well, it was mostly the fact that these are 40-year-old, 30-year-old interviews about stuff that happened 40 years earlier in a lot of cases.
Wow.
So a lot of stuff needed context. Anyway, that did pretty well, and people seemed to be interested in all that stuff. And then Direct Conversations was really just came about of the fact that we're all dying.
oh, jeez.
I'm 67 years old, and I broke into the business in 1975. Everybody in Direct Conversations are people who I broke into the business with, and instead of relying on 30-year-old transcripts of short interviews, I got on Zoom and did extensive interviews with all these guys, 10 different people, but we're all in our 60s and 70s, and the book is dedicated to Marty Pasco, who is was my age, and we lost him a few years ago. There's a lot of the Bronze Age is kind of everybody knows a lot about the comics, but I don't think there wasn't a lot out there about what it was like at the time. I was very much influenced by Will Eisner's Shop Talk, which is a great book. If you haven't read it, get it. He talks to Milton Caniff and Joe Kubert and guys like that. This is from interviews from the 70s and 80s. I was hoping to achieve a little bit of what he got, and just talk about the times and talk about the people who we work with. There's a lot of people that are kind of just names, like Saul Harrison and Jack Adler, even Murray Boltinoff, like he was just the name of an editor, but what do you know about him?
Yeah.
Right.
It's
So,
interesting. That's an interesting point because we've talked about your work before, Paul. We
I
every week, every time we do a show, we go back and we pick like random books. I picked Power Girl #1 from the 80s,
okay.
and your name came up, and it's very similar, isn't it? Paul Kupperberg. We know the name, but we don't know anything about Paul
Sure.
Kupperberg. We know that my wife got me a Mike Mignola book. It's like a big, thick hardback thing. Your Phantom Stranger stories in there,
Right.
and you're kind of like, these names, the industry's not just built on the Stanleys and the Steve Ditkos and the John Romita Juniors and the John Romita Seniors. There's a whole bunch of other people who are in the trenches, week in, month out, writing books, drawing the books and stuff.
Oh, sure. I mean, back in the '80s, I was doing 5 or 6 books a month. A prestigious amount of work, a prodigious amount of work. Excuse me, it wasn't all prestigious, but it was prodigious.
It was work. Let's just agree with that. It was work.
It was just a shit ton of work, and it was like and 4 of those books at least would be Superman. There would be Superman or Superboy or Supergirl or DC Comics or the Superman newspaper strip or something. So there were a lot of guys. I'm very cognizant of my place in the history of comics. I was a solid B player. I was which is cool. I was fine. It's I help keep I help keep the business going.
Keep the whole fires burning.
But and I did a lot of work. I did a lot of stuff that still seems to resonate, and people are still talking about it. I mean, there you are talking about Power Girl #1, from the Rick Holberg mini, right? Yeah,
that's it.
Good stuff, fun stuff. At the time it was kind of plugged centrally into the DC continuity. I just got retconned to death.
Yeah, you did. Atlantean. Who was thinking? Who thought Power Girl should be Atlantean? Yeah.
Well, Jerry Conway did. So.
Well, Jerry Conway needs to see. 13th hates Jerry Conway because Jerry Conway killed Gwen Stacy, right? That's his. Well, he was one of our co-hosts, and me. I hate Jerry Conway because he made Power Girl Atlantean. I don't hate him at all. I've never met the guy.
No, he's a very nice guy. He's a sweetheart. It was post-crisis, and Supergirl was gone. They still had Power Girl, but there was no explanation for why she was here. And Jerry just kind of looked around and said, "Well, let's plug her into this." It made as much sense as anything at the time.
Professor.
Yeah, no, I know that we were just talking about how when you broke into the business, it was especially in your book, it seemed like everybody, you said it was Zoom meetings, but I was picturing you just having a couple of beers and just, talking like some of the guys you haven't talked to in years.
Yeah.
And that it really made
the effect was the same. Whatever the setup was,
yeah.
that was the effect was sitting around and hanging out with a friend and just shooting the old times. So.
Shooting the breeze.
So I guess my question really was, what was it like being kind of like that first generation fan to creator, or going from growing up reading these heroes and then all of a sudden you're creating them or writing about them? 4 books a month.
Yeah, well, at the time we were too busy doing it to think about it. That's very much something that happens in retrospect. You sit back one day and you go, "Holy crap!" I did it. This thing that I had my eye on since I'm a kid. Not only did I accomplish it, but I accomplished it to this level. Again, B, which is better than I ever did in school, and so fine. I have 2 bookshelves full of stuff with my name in it. I've managed to get stuff done in my life.
Very impressive. Excellent. You've worked with some absolute gems of some creators.
Yeah.
I mean, the list of the book, it just absolutely like reads like a who of that time. Um, I have to open up and be a little bit naive here. All right, I was
Okay.
talking behind the scenes before you got here with the professor, and there's a bit in the Paul Levitt interview where you discuss you were writing the letter columns.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking to myself, what does he mean writing the letter column? Surely those are real letters that were sent in, every single one of them. Surely the letters weren't like
Absolutely. No question about it. They were all real. Somebody really wrote every single one of those letters.
Was that somebody you, Paul?
Sometimes, yeah. Sometimes we'd be hanging out at Levitt's place. It'd be a bunch of us, and he'd be working on a letters column. And he goes, "I don't have any letters for Weird War Tales." Well, and we'd sit down and we'd write a couple of letters.
Little Jimmy, I just see that little Jimmy supposedly writing.
Yeah.
I really like Weird War Tales. Please don't let my character die. Thank you.
It was like I actually created a Frank A. Nelson was one of my fake names.
Fan.
Yeah, fan. Yeah.
I love it.
How did I not see this? I have got a 52 years old. When I go through my back issues, I still read those letter pages.
Most of them were legitimate.
Yeah, right. Now you say that now.
For the most part, they were legitimate, but sometimes, there were books like, Ghosts didn't get a lot of mail. It's like, how much are you going to, everything's been said about Leo Dorfman. It's just,
It's like the curtain has come down of my Wizard of Oz life. Thanks.
That's right.
Well,
yeah, thanks.
The fun part about going back and reading those letters pages is seeing how many creators used to write letters. That's good. That's where I look back, and I actually made fun of Don McGregor because the address that he had in the 60s, it's just the same address he lives at today. So it was kind of funny.
Yeah. Don almost killed me at the last convention we were at. Out of love, but I saw him and I went over to say he was talking with a bunch of guys from
I was there with you. I brought Don to that convention.
Oh, that's okay. So you were there when he jumped me.
Yep.
he jumped on me to hug me, and I am not a strong man, and Don is not a light person, so he knew. I started to go over. It was. But we have a photo record of it, so it's fine.
That's with the insurance claim later.
But you know what, man? Like, here I am at this convention, and I'm I was with these guys. It was most of them. It was actually all Marvel guys.
Yep.
And I never hung out with Marvel guys. No. I mean,
I'm joking.
I was just a DC guy.
I'm a DC guy.
I read the comics and I worked for the company, and I did very little work for Marvel, and didn't really socialize with them. But I'm hanging out with these guys now. Now we're the we're the old guys at Comic Cons. We represent the Bronze Age. But there I am, getting hugged by Don McGregor, and it was just so cool. It was just like so nice to see that first that they're still around, and that Don is still just the same sweetheart that he always was. But it's just, it happens. I walk over to, I could walk over to these guys, and I've spent more time with Joe Giella at Comic Cons than I ever did as a professional in the business. It's cool. It's just, because in my heart I am still a fan. Stuff I grew up on is still very, dear to me. And the people who did it, and who I was fortunate enough to be able to work alongside. I'm just babbling here. So
I've got a question for you, because I'm enjoying. Nobody, when we do interview shows, nobody listens to the professor and me. They're used to us. On you. So help me out then, right? Because when I was reading comics back in the day, and I'd be flicking through the Marvels and the DCs and stuff. There was always talk about a softball game. Did those really happen?
Oh, sure.
Because I mean, you've already killed me with the letters, you know. So,
Yeah, no. The softball. I have some photos actually from the '80s that I put up on my website. They were from an old Warner's Communication, inter-house communications thing. There were Marvel and DC softball games, volleyball.
Who won the most?
Yeah, I didn't go because A, I'm not athletic, and B, I lived out on the asshole end of Brooklyn. And, getting home was like, all right, I'm not sticking around for this stuff. I have to go on the L train. That's punishment enough. So
Fair enough. Fair enough. Cool. When we look back at comic books, and I'm amazed at how many people worked on them. There was a chapter about how a freelance artist got this gig, and when I read it, I was absolutely grinning from ear to ear. Serendipity worked for Michael Kaluta, who he ended up coming on as a freelance gig for doing the Shadow as a fill-in artist, and nowadays it's Kaluta Shadow or that's it. It's like
absolutely.
Yeah. How did that kind of that sound? Not everybody struck gold like that, I suppose, but Kaluta did.
We used to, I think I covered it with other people, at various, I maybe even Paul as well. But you'd have an idea and you'd stick your head in somebody's door and say, "Can I do this?" And they'd go, "Okay," or "No." Mm-hmm. But now, back in the '90s when I was still on staff and early 2000s. There were proposals to be written and rewritten and committees to go through with proposals. Back then, a lot of this stuff was just, there were 35 people working at DC. And that included the accounting department. No kidding, So it was just, there was no bureaucracy. It was just a very informal thing. And, Denny, the story you're talking about is Denny walking into the coffee break room. And, his head in his hands going, "Oh my God, Steranko is flaked out and this is gone." And, and I have nobody to draw the Shadow. And Kaluta is sitting there, doodling on a pad and drinking coffee and going, "How about me? Can I draw it?" And then he goes, "Hold on." Goes and asks Carmine. Carmine says, "Sure." And Mike has the gig.
And not just that gig. He's the shadow artist for decades after that.
Yeah,
he's done the Shadow for DC. He's done it for Dark Horse.
Well, he's Mike Kaluta, for God's sakes,
Yeah, he is now. Back then, he wasn't. He was just Mike the coffee guy back then.
He always was. He just nobody had recognized it yet. But that's the way it worked. You could throw an idea. I got the Doom Patrol because Levitz called me going, "Yeah, we're bringing back Showcase," and they handed it to me. "I want to do the Doom Patrol. You interested?" Yeah. I mean, he knew Paul and I are old pals. We go back to the late '60s. We met in middle school. So he knew of my love for Doom Patrol, but still, and my proposal was, I think, 3 pages, 3 single space type pages.
So are you getting some credits for the Doom Patrol TV show? Are you getting any love off of that then?
I made it into the season end credits, the thank you thing.
That's nice. Yeah, that's a good call.
Yeah, they used my characters in an episode. They did a kind of a flashback thing. So,
well done.
Yeah,
Professor.
You just touched on the atmosphere in DC in the '70s. I was kind of looking at the kind of comparing and contrasting the atmosphere in DC as you went along, because you were there for '70s, '80s, '90s, and a bit of the 2000s, right?
Yeah.
How did it change over the time that you were there?
Well, it became a corporation. It became a big business. It became a company.
You went from 35 employees to 350.
350.
From 35 to 36.
There were at one point in the early 2000s there were 19 vice presidents.
What?
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. So it changed. It was just again, it was very informal. It had been, even though it had been owned by the company that was Warner Brothers, since the mid '60s, they kind of left it alone. They kind of didn't know what they had and weren't interested in it anyway. It was just kind of a piece of their puzzle.
Just about the same now, isn't it? I didn't say that. Sorry. Carry on.
Well, no, now they treat it with disrespect. Before they left it alone, now they neglect it. There's a big difference.
Fair point. Well made. Sorry, carry on.
But yeah, so we were all, when I started at 75 Rockefeller Center, there were, we had like a third of a floor. And when I left DC in 2006, we had 5 floors in a building.
Wow.
And then I went to the Weekly World News, which was, a whole nother story. But, it was just big and bureaucratic and top heavy. And I mean, again, one of my best friends was running the place, but, I don't play that game. I didn't, and Paul doesn't play the PAL game either. So, couldn't count on that. Jesus.
So did that color your decision to leave comics? Was the bureaucracy of it, or was you just looking for something new?
I had been assigned to. I'd been working for a series of truly bad managers. In the DCU and in licensed publishing and in licensing, just people I didn't like, didn't respect, and weren't respectful of their employees. And at some point I just got sick of it, and sick of taking crap from people who I was smarter than. So
I'm going to use that line at work tomorrow.
That's right. Fuck you. I'm smarter than you.
Yeah, I'm not taking your crap. I'm smarter than you. Huh?
That's right. Well, I certainly knew a lot more about comics than these guys did, but for most of them, I mean, there were some good ones in there. But when I was in the DCU doing the Wonder Woman, and I don't want to use any names because why boost their wavelength? But the senior editors running the place, I mean, I love Denny O'Neil, loved Archie Goodwin. They're not managers; they're creators. And Mike Carlin, I don't know what the fuck he is, but anyway.
Oh dear me.
Enough. Yes.
All right. Okay. Before we get into censorship, time for one of our adverts for one of our other shows. So, as Paul is, as he's mentioned, more DC than anything, makes sense. It's the Definitive Crusade. Having the Definitive Crusade for everything that is DC Comics. Might even talk some DC movies now that they've got their fingers out their asses and started doing some stuff. allegedly. Who knows? Right.
We'll find.
Time to show us. I said that, no one else. Right. Time to show some books. Booyah. Professor, this was one of your calls, was it not?
I wanted you to talk a little bit about Checkmate, Paul, because this was one of the books I really liked when I was just starting to get into the DC universe in the late '80s. This book really reminded me of it was like a cross between like Nick Fury and the Hellfire Club, to use some Marvel terminologies. But this was I really liked this book because there was like no superheroes, and that was kind of unique in DC.
Yeah, I was kind of heading in that direction anyway. You know, in my writing, it's I think I'd reached a point where like superheroes stopped making sense to me. You know, it's like, well, you know, if somebody bashes you over the head with a crowbar, you stay down. You know, so I was like, you know, having trouble with that. Although not that doesn't come into play in something like Checkmate. But still, yeah, it was it grew out of Vigilante, which was another, you know, which was kind of an in-between superhero and non-superhero comic. It still had, you know, relied heavily on costumes, of course, and Peacemaker played a big part in it. You know, we had a couple of costumed villains, although mostly it was street level stuff. You know, once I saw the book was mine, and you know, I took it away from the superhero universe and more into, you know, its own place, its own, you know, turned it into more of a street level book, like I said, because, you know, after I had been writing years of Superman, and after writing a guy who can do anything, you know, it was nice to have real people. To be able to write about, you know, real human beings.
Cool.
Was it more difficult to write a story about real human beings than?
Oh no, it's easy. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, you know, especially a book like that, you know, where I'm dealing with, you know, like, you know, what's in the news. I'm dealing with terrorism and you know, and things like that. You know, international intrigue. So, you know, no, that's easy to do. I mean, writing people is easy. You know, superheroes, you kind of have to, you know, like just before I got on here, I was watching reruns of The Adventures of Superman from the 1950s.
All right. I was watching Superman too. So
Yeah, well, you know, I grew up on the the show. It was I'd come home from school in the, you know, in the 60s after school. It would be on at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and I'd watch it. You know, I mean, it's 104 episodes. I've seen them each at least 100 times in my life, and yet I still watch them. And you know, these are the later season ones, which are not good. You know, I love them each and every one, but they're not good, and I recognize that, but I can still love them. You know,
It's that childhood thing.
yeah,
well,
yeah.
I think that about season 5 of Babylon 5, but you know.
Yeah, well, you know, but ideally, like, you know, comic books were a childhood thing, and you were supposed to outgrow them. And then, you know, we came along. Yeah, I know. We came along. You know, guys like you know, Roy Thomas and later me and my friends and all that. And we came along. It's like when you reach that 13-year-old point where you're supposed to give them up, you just keep reading. You know.
Hell yeah.
And it's not, it's really not natural. I mean, let's face it.
Oh,
You know,
thanks.
hey, you know, well, it's become natural because on a certain level, the books have become, you know, have stopped being aimed at the 13-year-old. Not on
That's
Exactly.
That is
Exactly.
They're no longer aimed at at the 13-year-old audience. They are aimed at you.
Yeah, that's fair enough. That's a
Yeah.
good point.
So, you know, but in my day and age, you know, when I was still reading them, you know, I took a lot of shit, you know, certainly school and stuff.
So let me ask you a question then, because you've just brought up an interesting point. If modern day comics are more geared towards us as adult readers, what is the fascination for going back into back issues? Because I'll tell you this now, I buy back issues as many as I can get my hands on. So why am I, if those books aren't aimed at me, or were never aimed at 52-year-old me, why am I still buying back issues?
OCD, dude.
No.
Yep.
No.
Every comic book fan has OCD.
Yep.
Son of a.
You gotta I
Yeah.
gotta collect it. I gotta have the whole run.
No.
Yep.
I used to have that. I was
No.
afflicted. Oh yes, I was, my child.
Yeah, I'm saying yes, you are, but for me, it's like
100%.
if a creator comes onto a book that I don't like, I will drop that book
Okay.
and I will not
I-
until they
and-
leave, and then
because
I
that
go back
shows
to the book.
Which is good because that shows some, adult discernment, which is,
Yeah.
nice to have, as opposed to I see these people online going, I hate what this guy is doing, and I have to keep buying the book.
Yep.
I
Cool.
can't break my run. What's this with the runs? Well, it's forget it.
No, I'm very much of a creator.
No, I know, but again, I'm not talking about the individual. I'm talking about the species as a whole. And it really, again, I used to suffer from it. I would, and even now, something will come up and I'll go, oh, I have to have that, and it's like it takes me a minute to go, no, I don't. I've spent the last dozen years lightening my load, getting rid of all this stuff. And on top of that, I was getting rid of all my stuff, and then my brother died, and I inherited his stuff that I had to get rid of as well. So I had to get rid of two people's stuff. Took a while.
So we've had one of the professors. We mentioned about this one earlier.
Mm-hmm.
There we go. Look at that. The Phantom Stranger. Early Mike Mignola. What was it about the Phantom Stranger that you liked so much?
I don't know.
He's not one of those characters that sort of like screams off the page, is he?
No. I always liked it. There was early on in the 60s, there was an issue of Showcase that reprinted some of the 1950s Phantom Stranger stuff by Infantino. There was originally a 5-issue run of a book called The Phantom Stranger, which came out around the same time as Danger Trail, which starred King Faraday. Yeah, but the Phantom Stranger, I love the character. I mean, back then it was Comics Code, so oh no, it may have been pre-code.
No,
the original book may have been pre-code.
Oh, okay, cool. We'll have to check.
But still, it was DC, so there was nothing like outrageous and crazy. But in the Phantom Stranger's world, everything was debunked. It was like it was just another. He would prove it would. It was like he pull off. I would have gotten away for it if not for this damn Phantom Stranger. But I liked that character, and then Neil Adams did some Phantom Stranger stuff in the in the 60s. That was just like and again people are used to Neil Adams and that style of dense illustrative art. But I can remember the first time I saw Neil Adams stuff, Neil Adams work. It was an Action Comics cover, Superman and the son of the Annihilator, and it's this kid in his Marlon Brando's motorcycle leathers, and he's punching out the Washington Monument while Superman holds his father by his costume villain father by his costume front. But I remember seeing that in the newsstand and literally jumping to grab this comic because like, what the hell is this? Not the situation, but the art was just like, you go from Kurt Swan, who I love and who, I work with, but man, Neil was just like, so his Phantom Stranger, just like intensified that character by about, a factor of 6. And I just always loved it. And then Len Wein came along and did a great run, and Levitz did a really good run, and Jim Aparo was on it, and Jerry Talair. It was just had a really rich history. And then it was I was looking for something to write, and there was a list of the characters who was free and who was being used by somebody, and I went through and there was Phantom Stranger, and it was like. And I instantly had an idea for a story that I knew I could sell to Denny O'Neil. Okay,
cool, excellent, well done.
Yeah,
well, I suppose that comes from knowing Denny, right?
Yeah, well,
what he likes.
Yeah, it was about kind of putting Phantom Stranger in kind of a Jesus position,
All right.
losing his powers and having to live among men to to save them.
All right.
I pitched it to Denny in those terms, and he was a lapsed Catholic, so he just ate it up. And then he took over the Batman books before I started writing the stuff. He approved it, and I started writing it, and he took over the Batman books. So I got shifted over to Mike Carlin to edit the books. But and to his credit, he's the one who brought Mignola over from Marvel to do the book. So so there is that.
There's a couple of names you've just dropped in this that just make me smile. First off, I will say, and this will please Professor more than it pleases me, I think Neil Adams' best work was on X-Men. I know he's done a load of Green Lantern and Green Arrow and Batman, but for me, his best work was always on the X-Men run.
I think it's some of his best work. Yeah, I agree. I think it was us, Tom Palmer. Jesus.
Yep.
You mentioned Jim Aparo. Jim Aparo is my Batman. When I was growing up, I was buying The Brave and the Bold, mainly because there were one-issue stories, so I didn't have to worry about getting the next issue. And the other one is Jim Aparo. Jim Aparo was my Batman, and he still is. He's up there.
His and Bob Haney's Brave and Bold Batman is my favorite Batman of all times.
And then, of course, I say Mignola because I'm English and I don't know anything about names because I'm useless at them. But Mike Mignola, I love the best book that came out of the 1989 Batman movie was Batman Gotham by Gaslight.
Oh, yeah.
That was the best book that came out, that whole crazy
was a great book.
Batmania thing.
Yeah.
Professor.
Oh, okay. I have one more question. It just kind of boils down to writing, right? And I know that you did Superpowers with Jack Kirby, and I think from when I think you mentioned in your book that when you wrote it, you didn't know who was going to draw it, and all of a sudden it was Jack Kirby. But that reminded me. So with Marvel, Jack Kirby with the Marvel method, where he would produce the art and then Lee would script over it. And did you write full scripts for the artists, or did you ever work backwards like that with when the art came in, you had to redo the script or anything like that?
I worked both ways. It depended on the assignment and the timing. If I had time, I'd write a full script. Again, there were points when I was doing, 5 books a week, 5 books a month, 6 books a month. So I would do plot first, but I didn't just do, a paragraph a page. I would break down, panel by panel per page. So I was essentially just writing the first half of the script for the artist anyway. But with the Superpowers, I wrote, traditional full scripts. The first mini had been done by Adrian Gonzalez, except for the last issue. And then the second one, so, I had no expectation that Jack would be, and frankly, who the hell gets Jack Kirby to draw his stuff? That doesn't happen unless your name is Stan Lee.
Yeah.
It
doesn't happen since your name is Stan Lee either. So it works both ways.
Yeah. It was just a stroke of luck, and it was, awesome. It was just, I was kind of writing structurally, I used the Silver Age Justice League of America as my model for the stories, because it was going to be my only chance really to write, a JLA story, a Justice League of America story. But Jack was just icing on the cake. It was just,
And did Jack take to full scripts well? I think to back up.
As far as I recall, he just, he drew what was written.
Oh, okay.
I frankly don't think he cared at that point.
Right.
This was a paycheck for him, which is cool. I mean, it was the last regular book he did. The last regular book he ever drew. And after his time and experience and all he had gone through, it's okay. Jack can coast.
Yeah.
Was it cool having the toy line to support your book?
Yeah, I didn't really think about it that way. I mean, it was just a gig to me, you know. It was just a, you know, it was a licensing kind of a licensing kind of thing. Yeah, I mean, you know, it was. Yeah, I'd also done Masters of the Universe, which I think, yeah, the Masters of the Universe came before the superpower stuff.
Yeah.
So, you
I
know,
know 12-year-old me ends up with the comics because of the toys. So
yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, I guess that did apply, and you know, I don't remember what the you know, I guess there must have been there were royalties in those days, but I think the threshold was 100,000 copies, so I don't know. I don't know whether or not that book hit that, but
Cool, cool. Excellent. There you go. So, Paul, the book is out now,
yes,
correct?
it is available either on Amazon and all around the world, or you can get copies directly from me. I sign and personalize them, and you can just go to my website at paulkupperberg.net, and there's a shop there with a whole bunch of my books and some of the comics and stuff. So you know, check that out.
Excellent. Excellent. Paul, you've been absolutely fantastic. I absolutely love hearing the stories. I could sit here and listen for at least another hour. But my
Well,
wife
no,
will go.
no, then you have to start paying me.
Well, my wife will kill me for
It's
missing
free,
Sunday
but after
lunch.
that, let's get real.
Fair enough. Fair point. Paul, thank you so much for spending
You're
the time.
welcome. It's been fun.
Excellent. Professor,
Thanks,
thank
Paul.
you as always.
Thanks, John.
Been a blast. Don't forget to check out the UCPM for all your favourite shows. You saw the advert earlier for the Definitive Crusade. And if you like Marvel, check out his.
Somebody
I can't
does.
do it. There he is. His pod. Never get the angles right. His pod, the No Price Podcast for everything that's Marvel, MCU, and Disney Plus. Correct?
Yeah, we hit everything. Yeah.
Did you say hit or hit? I didn't.
Oh,
hit.
hit. We hit
Yeah,
everything.
just
Hate
checking.
almost everything, but
There
it's
you
okay.
go. Okay. All right. So, thanks again to Paul. Thanks to the Professor. I've been your host, Jonathan Machine Hughes. And as always, adios.
Thanks, Johnny.